Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Outright Podcast. If you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. And please go ahead and comment down below what guests you want to see on the podcast. So today we will be talking about the utter catastrophe that was the 2023 general election in Ohio, Kentucky, and Mississippi. Obviously, there are, as you know, other general elections in the states of Texas, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Maine, Connecticut, and Colorado. But those states weren't as grandiose and have greater negative repercussions than what we're going to be talking about today. So starting off, we're going to be talking about Ohio Issues 1 and 2. A few weeks back, we talked about Ohio Issue 1 and how Ohioans should go out and vote no on it. For those who aren't familiar, Travis, could you give us a brief rundown on what the Ohio Issue 1 was?
Yes. Issue 1 in Ohio was a proposed constitutional amendment that passed that enshrined the right to abortion in the Ohio Constitution. It enshrined the right to other things as well, but it was really abortion with all those other things thrown in there as a distraction. So it always protects abortion up through 22 weeks. And after that, it puts the decision of the abortion into the hands of the Planned Parenthood abortionist who obviously has an agenda. I don't know, there's this liberal idea that for some reason professionals can't have agendas, but they can. So Issue 1 protects abortion essentially through all 9 months of birth. We'll soon see if the Ohio parental consent law is upheld or struck down by the Supreme Court. The ACLU will probably challenge that.
All right. Well, something that I heard you say was that on Issue 1, Article 22, it's now cemented in the Ohio Constitution. It's not a law, it's a constitutional amendment now. And I think that's something that most Ohioans didn't necessarily, consider. And between the slithery language and just not really talking about that, I think that's what led to Ohio Issue 1 being passed. So in a 56.6% vote, abortion is now illegal in the most extreme measures in Ohio up until birth, and this is, quite frankly, an attack on parents' rights and children's safety. All right, so my question for the both of you guys is, where did we go wrong? How did we lose such a vital election in such a red state? We'll start with you, John.
So I think the biggest problem is so many people in Ohio were uneducated about the bill, and not only that, there was not enough, how would you say? Cut that part out. There wasn't enough funding for pro-life initiatives in the state to let people know about what exactly Issue 1 was about. A lot of people were very ignorant about it. A lot of people didn't know about it until they went to the voting booth, and then they were like, oh, okay, I guess I'll vote yes on this, because they didn't know exactly what it was. I think really in the future, pro-life groups really need to work a lot harder, raise a lot more money to try and go and raise more funds to educate people on what exactly is going on with these certain sorts of bills. And I also think there was a failure to appeal to the average voter in the campaigns where they were trying to say, oh, vote no on Issue 1. In a lot of cases, they were talking about, oh, it's not good for parents' rights. Or you had Mike DeWine coming out, and he's not the most charismatic guy out there, and he's out here saying vote no on Issue 1, and I don't think that was very effective. I think they could have done a lot better job, and unfortunately, this has massive repercussions now, because this legislation is going to lead to millions of babies being aborted that could have lived long, happy lives. It's going to lead to probably, well, if you give the left an inch, they take a mile. So they're probably going to start hammering through stuff about requiring, this is hypothetical, but they could potentially start trying to ram through bills about puberty blockers, whether kids can go on those, that kind of stuff. And it's just a really bad precedent in general, not to mention just the immediate effects of it. So that, I think, is where we went wrong, and I think there's going to be some serious repercussions for that for a long time.
You, Travis?
So, I think sometimes in our efforts to just make fun of the liberals because of the stupid stuff that they do, we neglect to remember that they've been at this game of trying to do bad stuff for a long time, and they've gotten pretty clever. And you saw that in issue 1. It was political gobbledygook, and it was about abortion. That was the sole idea. But they threw in contraception, they threw in miscarriage care to fearmonger and distract, and then they framed the whole amendment almost in this kind of conservative light, like, it's just about freedom, man. We just support freedom. And I mean, so, and you see this this similar theme in the names of leftist organizations, right? The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Somebody who's not familiar with like how evil the American Civil Liberties Union is will just think, yeah, I mean, I like civil liberties. Or the Human Rights Campaign, which is just a LGBTQ agenda pusher. I mean, they'll be like, yeah, I like human rights. So I think, we need to take the liberals very seriously. We need to remember that they're bad, but they're very good at being bad. And we need to get our own ballot initiatives and enshrine the right to life and constitutions in our own politically gobbledygook language.
So another ballot measure that Ohioans came out to vote for was Issue 2, which legalized the use of recreational marijuana for those people who are 21 years or older. And it's now a taxed item. It's now a taxed item just like alcohol. So with a 57% yes vote, Ohio is now a pot-headed state. Me personally, I would rather have a nation full of drunks than a bunch of potheads, unmotivated potheads running around in the streets. So get ready to go ahead and see DUIs skyrocket, drug-related car accidents skyrocketing. So what are your guys' thoughts on this? What are your guys' thoughts?
So, a couple days ago, I saw an article that I briefly skimmed, talking about Oregon. If you're not aware, a couple years ago, I believe, or maybe even a couple months ago, it all kind of blends together. Oregon legalized all drugs, hard drugs, marijuana, you name it. And a lot of Oregon voters, liberals and conservatives alike, are now really unhappy with this measure because there's like people lying in the streets high, people lying in the streets overdosing. Very bad. So, that we've just legalized marijuana in Ohio, not hard drugs, but it's all on the spectrum, and we've taken a step. And just being high all the time, walking around with your wits not about you, bumbling like a moron, is not beneficial to human flourishing. And it's that simple. Like, it's not good for people. It's not good for society.
Yeah, and I absolutely have to agree with Travis on that. Weed does not encourage good behavior at all. It makes people sluggish. It makes people, lazy. It doesn't make you want to go out and do anything, not anything productive anyway. I do think, though, the reason why this got pushed so hard is because I think the state of Ohio had a reason for wanting to legalize marijuana, and let me explain. So, a lot of neighboring states, for example, Michigan, already had legalized marijuana, and so people who wanted the drug were going out of state to obtain it, and those tax dollars they were using to spend on it was going to other states, not to Ohio. And any state that that has that kind of stuff going on in it, where people are leaving the state to go and get something that's not legal in that state has a incentive to legalize that thing in order to increase their own revenue. This is why we've seen, it started with California, Colorado, New York, those sorts of states, Illinois. Those were the first states to start legalizing weed, and then other surrounding states started to, because they were like, we need to get more of that money. We need to get some of the money that they're getting. And so that's, I think, the reason why it's become such a common thing now that's the reason why it's being pushed so hard all around the country, is because people are realizing, or state governments are realizing, hey, if we could make more money, we could get more revenue if we allow this in our state, we can tax it then. And so there's an economic incentive there for them to legalize marijuana, as much as there's going to be bad side effects that come from that. It's just kind of how the incentive structure works. So I think that's also, it's a state issue because it's not illegal, not necessarily completely illegal on the federal level anymore. So there's basically no drawback to any state saying, oh yeah, you can come buy marijuana here. And so I think we're on that front, we've definitely lost, and we've lost some ground there. But I don't think all hope is lost. I think people have enough common sense to not let this go much further. I think to not do what Oregon did. I mean, if people have their wits about them, they would know that, what happened in Oregon was no good. And so we might be able to avoid having all drugs legalized all across the country, but definitely the marijuana issue, I think, is a lost cause at this point.
Very good. So up next, we're going to be talking about the Mississippi gubernatorial election, in which Tate Reeves took on Elvis Presley's second cousin, Brandon Presley. I'm not sure if you knew that. The funny thing about this election and why we're bringing it up in the first place is that Brandon Presley is arguably more conservative than the Republican Tate Reeves. And so the night before the recording of this episode, me and a very good friend of mine went out and watched the gubernatorial debate for Mississippi. And we'll just say that Tate Reeves was like he was an utter embarrassment for the Republican Party. And frankly, I have no clue how he managed to, get through the primaries. He came out against increasing the police force, and overall it was just an awful debater. He was cycling through the same 5 typical talking points. So in the majority of cases, when a governor is unpopular, they obviously lose. They lose elections. And, well, this isn't the case for Tate Reeves. With a favorability rating of only 46%, he somehow still managed to pull off the win. So the unfavorable and scandal-infested Tate Reeves won the gubernatorial election with 51.6% of the vote. So usually when you have someone who's involved in a scandal, said candidate usually doesn't run for re-election, or at least is primaried out. Like, for example, you're going to be seeing this probably next year with Lauren Boebert, with all the scandals that are going on with her. So according to Mississippi Today, Reeves was involved in a scandal, and I quote, in which at least $77 million in federal funds intended for the state's poorest residents were misspent and redirected to wealthy, politically connected Mississippians between the years 2017 and 2020. On the other hand, you have Brandon Presley, who was arguably more socially conservative, as I said, but mostly solidified his campaign off of the welfare scandal of Tate Reeves. And his social conservative views, which in my opinion lost him the election because he didn't talk about them. Additionally, he called for the cutting of the car tax in half and the abolishment of the grocery tax, which is the highest percentage in the country at 7%. And I don't know, it was smart for him to attack the unpopular governor, but strategically, you need to also show the people of Mississippi why you are the better candidate. So I would like to hear your guys' thoughts on this. We'll start with you, Travis.
So I'm not super familiar with this race, but I do know that typically even with scandal-racked administrations, a lot of times the incumbent still holds an advantage just from having been in the government for however many years.
Because they're familiar
term
with the
is.
name, right?
Yeah, people are familiar with the name, familiar with what that person did. But yeah, as Zach mentioned, this is a lot of times it's a problem that a lot of politicians run into is they rely too much on just browbeating their opponent. And like I said, I wasn't very familiar with this, but if what Zach said, the Kentucky governor,
Mississippi.
the Mississippi governor was racked with scandal, and Presley just attacked him without talking about his own views, which socially conservative views in Mississippi they'll win elections. Mississippi is not New York. It's deep red. It's dark red, man.
All right, you and John?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what Travis said. I also think you have to have a bit of a spine in order to beat the guy who's the incumbent. I think you have to be willing to take at least some risks in order to secure your voter base. And it sounds to me like Brandon Presley didn't do that very well. And I mean, it's okay to attack your opponent on charges of corruption, but ultimately what the people of America want is a vision of the future. They don't want to hear you to say, oh, these and these are the reasons why this candidate is bad, so vote for me instead. They want to hear that, but they also want to hear, okay, what's your alternative plan for the future that's going to make their lives better, make their lives easier, make their lives more convenient. And from what I know, my limited knowledge of this subject, I don't really think that Presley did a very good job of that, but I do think that this is a place where other conservatives can learn from this, or just political actors in general, like anyone involved in politics who's running against an incumbent governor or an incumbent in any position can learn that you do have to have more than just attacks. You need to have a vision, because that's what people want. That's what people want to hear.
Absolutely. So this is one of the very, very, very rare situations that me personally, I would have voted for a Democrat. You're not going to hear that too often, but yeah, if I was a Mississippian, I don't know. I would not vote for Tate Reeves in this situation, because Brandon Presley, who's anti-abortion, way more anti-abortion than Tate Reeves. He's in favor of cutting taxes. He's in favor, or he's pro-2A, and in many other instances, he's more conservative than Tate Reeves.
And, I think Zach kind of, danced around this bush too. There's something to be said, just Tate Reeves was the Republican name on the ballot. And especially in Mississippi, that's gonna matter a lot, because a lot of people, they're gonna vote for a Republican. It doesn't matter if it's the squishiest Republican that ever lived and the most conservative Democrat that ever lived. Like I said before, Mississippi is just a deep red state.
Moving on to the next and final election that we're going to be covering is the Kentucky gubernatorial election. In this election, you had incumbent Democrat Governor Andy Beshear taking on Republican Daniel Cameron. Unlike Tate Reeves, Andy Beshear is a popular governor in the state of Kentucky and overall a middle-of-the-road moderate Democrat. But unfortunately, he advocates for, the pro-killing babies movement, a.k.a. the abortion. And, well, he wants no limits on that, which is just complete and utter bogus. And additionally, he ran on a platform which is all about revising state healthcare programs and piggybacking off of his so-called successes during the lockdowns in 2020. On the other hand, you had Cameron, who was far more conservative, not super conservative, but obviously far more conservative than the moderate Democrat Beshear. and he was running under the Republican Party on abortion. Cameron's website claimed, and I quote, he is a pro-life champion who defended Kentucky's pro-life laws, including the Heartbeat Bill, Humanity and Healthcare Act, and House Bill 5, which outlaws the discriminatory abortions based off of race, gender, and perceived disability. It is also said that, and I quote, as governor, Daniel will fight hard to support law enforcement. A Cameron administration means that victims, not criminals, get our priority. So talk to me, guys. What are y'all thinking?
I mean, I think Cameron probably did I think from what I know about this race, it does seem like Cameron did a pretty good job of campaigning. It's just a matter of you had an incumbent that was presumably just someone, like Travis said before, was someone that people were familiar with. So they're like, okay, I'm going to vote for him. And unfortunately, that's a very common thing nowadays. A lot of people just vote for whoever they know the most about, or they know the best, or that they think is kind of just a holdover from the past. You know, it's kind of like an idea of, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the problem is, from what I know, it sounds to me like the incumbent in this situation was a much worse option. So I think that's really what was going on here. It doesn't seem too out of the ordinary for me. So I'm not too surprised about this one overall.
Yeah, and along with what John said, you had the voters that were just voting for the familiar name, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. As the Democrats did all across the nation this election. Andy Beshear ran on abortion sometimes, and that brings out the libs to vote. They're angry that they might not be able to kill their babies. They're angry that they might actually have to have natural consequences. So when you have that voting population plus the voting population that just votes for the familiar candidate, which is sometimes a normal thing to do. Like, it's a familiar candidate. Your life hasn't gone too terribly in the last 4 years, but when you combine those two populations, you have a winning candidate. And the election wasn't a landslide. It wasn't super close, but it wasn't a landslide. And that margin will do it.
So in conclusion, overall, the 2023 general election cycle was, as I said earlier, an utter catastrophe for conservatives and the pro-life movement alike. Could you guys give me your final takes on this election cycle?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So I think in Ohio, we learned that the Democrats are going to spend a lot of money to kill babies. They're gonna spend a lot of money to make weed legal too. So conservatives need to put their own ballot initiatives on the ballots across states, propose their own constitutional amendments to protect conservative values, to protect traditional values, and we need to have candidates who have spines, who are going to not only hit at their opponents, but they're going to actually talk about what they're going to do. And we need to, above all, just support candidates who, are normal. Like, they don't support weird trans stuff. They don't support killing the babies. They're, like, 20 years ago, they could have passed for a Republican or a Democrat. I can't believe I'm saying this, but taxes, as long as they're not, advocating, 20% taxes or, saying we should get rid of all taxes and start, you have to pave your own section of road. We need to support candidates who support just traditional social values, and then we can worry about taxes when America's social fabric isn't ripping apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. We have to focus on social issues first before we focus on economic issues, because the economic and social issues are intertwined. It's complex, but it's intertwined. Also, I think the thing we need to learn is Republicans have to spend more money on, and not just spend more money, but actually win. But we have to focus more on making sure that the populace knows what is actually going on instead of just letting them listen to whatever they hear on the nightly news. And we need to ramp up the amount of funding we're putting towards ballot initiatives that are in our own interests. And also, I do think we need to run good candidates. We have seen in the past couple of election cycles, we saw this in 2022 in the midterms, we've seen it again this year. The people who could have won are often the people who didn't run, especially, on the Republican side of things. And also, I think we just need a good and proper strategy in terms of taking the country back. If Republicans want to actually hold any amount of power in the country in the future, we absolutely have to run the best candidates we can find, and we absolutely have to have spines. We have to focus on getting what we want done actually done, and we need to focus on running good candidates who can do it.
All right, that'll do it for the show. Again, please like, comment down below who you want to see on the show, and subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. God bless.